What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mind, Muscle, and Mission podcast on the NFM Podcast Network. My name is Ben, your co-host. This next individual is clean-looking fella right here, Christian. What's going on, Christian?
All right, man. How's it going? Trying to do the best I can, Trying to stay clean. Might as well. Nothing else we got nowadays.
Hey, small
And
victories.
that's all you can do. And we are absolutely honored to be joined by Kaitlin Chacon today. Just an illustrious career, Air Force, medical, the whole nine. Just kind of just voicing in, just doing amazing work for the veteran community and the active duty community is in general. So honestly, if you just want to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about you, and we'll kind of go off from there.
Yeah. So my name is Kaitlin Chacon. I currently live in Nashville. I am an Air Force veteran. I was in the Air Force for 8 years. This is my puppy, if anybody can see. So sorry. She's actually being trained to be my service dog. So I kind of have to let her be attached to me at all times. Um, I worked on F-16s and F-35s. I was a weapons troop, so I loaded the bombs and missiles onto the jets. Did that for 8 years, and then I just really had a passion for psychology and neuroscience. And so I decided to get out and use my GI Bill to pursue that. So I did a lot of research for a while, and then I made the leap into the OR, and now I'm a surgical neurophysiologist, which is a really cool way to say that I just help neurosurgeons monitor the nerves throughout surgeries and help with them different modalities. So I'm really have a great melody of understanding mental health, physical health, and overall why all those things are connected. And I'm also a co host on a military podcast called Mentors for Mil. And they do a lot of great work of sharing people's testimony and just giving like really great information and connecting the veteran community together.
Perfect. I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, just in general, and at least you're exploring your passion. So let's kind of get in. We'll talk about your work with the Air Force here in a minute because we'll just dive into that, this whole thing. What really sparked your interest for just mental health? I mean, just because I've looked into some of your research in that you were doing with
Yeah.
the PTSD or the neurodevelopment issues in PTSD in adolescents due to
Yeah.
combat. If you can kind of dive into that a little, because I was like, that's
Yeah.
something I never thought about, but I was super interesting to hear about in general.
Um, I hate to be kind of egotistical in the matter, but I think I was subject zero for my interest in mental health. While I was in, I definitely started to suffer from really poor mental health, depression, and then I later developed PTSD. So I think as I was trying to help my own self, I kind of just realized I was seeing it like I wasn't the only person. I was just the only person raising my hand and saying there was an issue. And I, in the Air Force, was like kind of a mechanic. And so I always kind of think about troubleshooting issues. And I love that I served in the Air Force on the flight line on the jet. So I learned how to work in high pressure situations, high stress situations quickly, and where it actually matters. Because as a lot of people know, when you're working on the jets and you have like 7 to 9 minutes to scramble those jets, or else lives are going to be lost. Uh, so then when I was thinking about how to troubleshoot my own life and that I wanted to survive all of this, I just was looking into it for myself and pursuing help and doing a lot of study because I felt like maybe the counselor that I was issued at mental health, she's great, but I don't know if she understood me. And so she just kind of led me some books, and I just started studying, and I just became so passionate about neuroscience and the brain. And it became just like my little side project where I was constantly just figuring out how to study. And then finally, I was getting to that make or break moment where I needed to re-enlist and put me at 12 years or get out. And I was like, what if the government just pays me to do this and I'm doing it anyway? And I just make a career out of that. And then I kind of did all the math to understand that I could actually just make more money at the end of the day, and I'll just sacrifice for a couple of years. And I am a single mother, and I was afraid that we weren't going to get a good assignment next that would be helpful, or that they're going to send us overseas. So I just made that leap out and I haven't looked back.
Can you the leap out? And I think that's a great way to describe it, because a lot of people, that's the 10-year mark. Is after you get to 10 years, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do at least shoot to do 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing, that leap and kind of go through of your, what your mind was going through. I know you had a lot of other extrinsic factors,
Yeah.
your child and your mental health always takes priority over being in uniform. But
Yeah.
what was kind of the, other than those two things, what was the final decision of saying, okay, 8 years
Yeah.
is enough. I've done my duty in my service.
Yeah, I definitely troubleshot that as well. So, the first thing that I tried pathwise, when I graduated NCO school, basically my colonel from my group, which is I think battalion for the Army, and I'm not sure for Navy or Marines. Um, I guess he took a liking to me and he wanted me to go OCS. And I didn't have a degree, let alone enough credits to like do the 2 year reserve thing where you can then come
Mhm.
back. And so he's like, no, we're going to make it work. I think we really need to retain you as an officer. And so he was asking me what I wanted to do. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, like there's all these things that you say when you hate your job and you're like cursing like your placement and your branch. Like, I'd rather be doing this. I'd rather be inside. Oh, look at them. Like, they're never stressed out. And then I kind of thought about it. I was like, no, I'm doing like what the Air Force is supposed to do. I kind of don't like, I don't know if this is my pride. I'm a 20 something year old, but I was like, I make money at the end of the day and I save lives. So I didn't want to like leave that. And so I knew then that there wasn't another job in the Air Force that I wanted to do. And then I was thinking, okay, if I stay, in fighter squadrons, what else could I be doing in the fighter squadrons that would bring me the stability I'm looking for, maybe, or just like make me more excited for life? And I was looking around and I was like, I don't want my boss's job. I don't want his job. I don't want that job. I've seen like what that his life is like, 15 years in with this job. And I was like, I think I just am at peace with the things I've done and I'm proud of myself and, don't make something turn into a worse thing it is. Believe that it's good.
Yeah. Did you know you were going to go into neuro when you got out? Because your journey
Yeah,
to get to Nashville
it's been crazy.
was a journey nonetheless, right?
It's definitely a journey.
Yeah.
Looking out, I was like, oh my gosh, she's been about everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. I think that was the freedom too. Like I was so used to moving around and being high speed that I was like, opportunity, I'll go, opportunity, I'll go, opportunity, I'll
Hmm.
go. And I think then I kind of wore myself out with opportunities where I was like, oh, I'm ready to settle. And I kind of found my mesh and I'm just going to do that. Um, but to answer your question, Ben, it was more or less um, I found a program. I talked to a counselor. I didn't have to move because my last assignment was like a 1 year sweetheart assignment in my home record at Phoenix. And then
Oh, nice.
I just went to ASU and started like I think 2 weeks after my separation, I was in classes already.
Nice. No wait period for that. Just dive right in.
No, I don't. I do not have wait periods.
Well, good.
Nice. And when did you just recently ish moved to Nashville, right?
Yeah,
What
I
kind
moved
of
here 2 years ago, and I moved here basically for like plenty of things, but it was kind of like I was tired of like chasing the carrot on a stick, and I wanted stability. And I knew that Nashville had all the things I needed to make it work long term.
Okay. Sweet. I mean,
Nice.
yeah, it's definitely a good spot. I mean, that's for
Hmm.
sure.
So after you went to ASU, what did you do after? Because and then what brought you like neuro and I love the problem solving mentality of, hey, this is, something I'm going through. And I'd argue that numerous amounts of veterans and active duty individuals go through that. And so kudos, that's awesome that you took that approach to troubleshoot your own self. But when did that lead into really the focus on PTS and what have
Mm,
you learned about A, PTS, and then B, yourself through your education?
yeah. Oh my gosh, such a great question. So, Just a asterisk is I actually did only 1 year at ASU, and
Okay.
it wasn't going to be a good use of my GI Bill money, essentially. So just the program, they're going to require a lot out of me that actually wasn't going to make me a better clinician, scientist, whatever. It was like I had to take 2 years of a foreign language, and I'm dyslexic, so that I was like, I can't just be focusing on this, and it's not going to do anything for me. And so I was really interested in the University of Colorado's program, and I talked to a counselor there, and they're a little bit more military friendly, and they also had a lot more labs, and they had more, I don't know how you want to say it, like all of CU's benefits in the Denver downtown campus with a lot smaller class size. And what I knew I needed is I needed to be networking, I needed to be talking, I needed to get mentorship. Like I kind of took all those things that made me great in the Air Force, and I was like, boom, I'm going to apply them here, and I am going to be on professors to like give me a shot and like to learn, and show how like hungry I am. And so I made that move, and it was great. I would not have the career I have today if I did not go to CU and make that jump and get into their honors program. And the research I was able to get, I was able to go to a fellowship and do great research at Syracuse University, which you quoted earlier. That's where that research from
Yeah.
on developmental brain development and the correlation of PTSD symptoms. Um, what was the later part of your question? How I got interested in PTSD?
Yeah, and like how you just kind of understood yourself, but what do you learn about yourself when the floodgates of knowledge about
Yeah,
PTSD came?
I think it was just going like I said, like I kind of felt a little high on my horse when I was leaving. I was like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Like, I'm going to conquer the world. Like, I'm never going to be kicked down. And then I got into a college
Yeah.
campus with 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and they're being disrespectful. And not only are they being disrespectful, then I'm like, fine, I'll go to the Veterans Center. And then it's mostly male veterans, and they're disrespecting me. They won't even acknowledge me as a peer. They won't even acknowledge that I served, let alone how long I served or that I did more than them. Like I'm talking to people who
Hmm.
are admin in the Army, and I was like, what are you even here for? Like, and you start like wanting to like stiff arm people. And I think that made me realize, like, and I was alone in that. Like, I wasn't meeting other female veterans, let alone female veterans that were single mothers or like were dedicated to get somewhere. And so I would meet somebody like me in each one of those categories, but not the whole. And I think that flared any PTSD symptoms that were not as symptomatic, and I definitely started to deal with like a lot of hypervigilant issues. Like a lot of things were coming up for me that I was like just kind of on edge a lot. And then if anything happened, I kind of just like lost that week where and then I might like not do great on a test. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like my whole objective and all of like things I lined up was an awesome game to be great at this. And now this isn't working because of things that happened to me. So
Hmm.
I just started to really dive in um, to in my own personal wellness, but I was actually interested in like developmental psychology to become essentially like a child psychologist at the game of it. And all of my professors, when they would assign me like projects or works or like push me towards something, it was always PTSD and military psychology. And I was like, no, I'm out now. I don't want to be identified because they won't even accept me over there. So I don't care. Like I don't want to be part of it. Like I'm good. Like I'm turning direction in my life, and then like you should really like think about it. And I would just kind of get like argumentative and like stiff arm them a little bit, but I'm glad they did, and they kind of saw that somebody like me was needed in that they knew there was gaps and they just didn't know what the gaps were in the research. So, and then having my own personal anecdotes, and then other people have always felt really comfortable just telling me things about themselves that they don't want to tell others. And so then all of a sudden people just started telling me things about themselves. And I'm like, now I have some anecdotes and some leads to work on some things. And I'm able to correlate data in a different way than others. And I think that's because I had that same experience when I did join the military as a woman, where I was like, I'm competitive and I'm like able to match my peers, but then that's not good enough. So I got to do a little bit more. And then I also got to hold myself at another standard so that like they'll just recognize all that I'm actually doing. And so I started to kind of understand everything I'm learning in psychology. Veterans are dealing with it and they have no idea they're dealing with it. And I thought to myself, I'd be a great person to fill that gap in research. And I'm motivated to do so for my own personal reasons. Um, so then I just leaned into it all the way and actually started my own podcast for female veterans. And I was getting a lot of stories and anecdotes from anybody and everybody that it was almost like it was an alternative podcast at the time, that everything was very bro vetty and very combat oriented. And I was just like,
Hmm.
whatever's not that, let it be said here because it's already being said. So let's talk about something else. And I would like hear somebody's story and then I would just start kind of like, oh, that's an antidote that is interesting. Like, let me see if it's in the literature somewhere. It's already been replicated and it's just not been highlighted in any way. Um, and I started noticing that all the individuals who were authoring and doing this research were civilians. So they weren't understanding confounds
Yeah.
within their data because it's a different population. So they didn't run proper statistics for the confounds and didn't know how to factor them out. An example would be like if they were talking about lifestyle or something like that, like something super simple, they would not take out an officer from a sample. They would keep them in. Or say their sample size is 200, they wouldn't separate 100 enlisted to 100 officers. So if we're talking about lifestyle, that's two different lifestyles. So then you have good data that you collected. You don't know how to analyze it because you don't understand the nuances of the culture. So I just was like, oh, I could do that. That would be easy. Like that's not really hard at all. And then that will get me to, a PhD program where I could expand on it if I want, or I could do the other things that I have been interested in, and then just help in the meantime. And then once I actually started to get into PTSD research, I think I just kind of found my wings.
You did say something about like the
That's
empowering
it.
female veterans, and I think that's pretty special.
I forgot what I was saying.
And giving them a voice, and I think that's a necessity, right? And a lot of it is difficult to be. I can only imagine how difficult it is to be in a male dominated organization, which is the military, with females that are like yourself and that are accomplished. And jealousy is maybe a word for it, but it's unfortunate that you and other women had to feel you know not as peers, right? Less than peers. And what kind of how have you seen the veteran female podcast that you started, and what does that give in you, like the fulfillment that you've been able to see, like you said, a gap where someone, a community's not being heard, but should not be forgotten.
Hmm.
And then what have you seen, and what's your experience doing that?
Well, I wanted to highlight the greatness of female veterans, not just the nuances that you hear the most at safety briefings. Um, I felt like the only thing that was being talked within a male veteran scene within that culture was females being sexually assaulted or females not pulling their weight or females getting pregnant. Like there was only these three things, and
Yeah.
like that's barely a part of any of our stories. Like it may occur, but that didn't make up my entire service. You know what I mean? Like those that none of those things were on my EPRs. You know what I mean? There was plenty of other great things. There's plenty of other great things in my medals. And so I started doing more research on just, veterans that had already been done. And I was finding these amazing statistics that were not being highlighted to anybody. Like I was a female veteran. I had no idea. Like I was amongst amazing individuals statistically. One thing that is so incredible about this population is that um, I'm trying to phrase it correctly, and I haven't read it in a long time, so I might chop it up, but essentially, if you compare a civilian female population and a female veteran population, the female veteran population in, say, the first quarter of their life will be behind. They'll be substantially with significance behind than the civilian female population. And then they skyrocket into the second quarter, and they always surpass those peers of civilians, and to where they are more accomplished in their civilian sectors as far as income, like status, and kind of like not rank, but like positions within companies or companies they've created. And I was just like, why can't we just talk about this? And so many of these podcasts are just talking about the woes of combat or the bitching and complaining or just like the jokes. And I was like, this is all fine because people need it, obviously. There's plenty of healing and dark humor and sharing
Well,
trauma.
that's
But I
it's
was like, but
amazing. I
why can't
mean,
we
I'm
like
glad
lift
that
up
it's being
others?
talked about
And
because it
why
needs to be
can't there
talked
be
about.
an echo
It's
of
not
like,
in
you're
it.
awesome. Like, in
All
case you
while
didn't
you're
know it,
talking
you're
about this, it
awesome. You're
reminds me
my
of the Sydney
amazing
Jazz
population.
Vasquez interview that y'all did. If I'm butchering the last name, I mean, just the impressiveness of how you're able to speak with her. I mean, just through the amount of trauma that she went through. Because was she the first tabbed female? Is that it was? I believe that's her story. And just
Yeah.
Yes.
okay,
Short
okay.
tab. Short tab.
But just listening to her story and how once
She's
you
the
and her
first
started
tabbed
talking, how
female
much she
in
like opened
75th
up, and it sounded
Regiment.
like a
I think that's
lot
like
of
the
her opening up
official
about
title of it.
the abuse that she
Yeah.
went through just during her time, and it's so amazing that you're giving these women voices that feel like they can't have it, and I think that's a good thing that's changing in our military culture. I believe it's we're making progress. I just saw recently that they're making the same sex requirements for all combat roles. I believe that's the push that they're moving on at this. I think that
Yeah.
everything needs to be equal. I mean, just flat out as it is, or you can't. There shouldn't be any. You're higher than this because of this. You're higher than that because of that.
Hmm. Well, and I think the research shows, I would have to do another lit search on
Yeah,
it, but I think the research shows the ones that have done it, there's
yeah.
Yeah,
not many of
absolutely.
it,
And
that
I've
it
worked
is
with a
never
lot
a
of
request of the female
civil affairs
population
and
for
psychological
standards to be
operation
changed.
teams,
It's
and
always needing manpower,
there's a reason
which is
why,
out of their
and there's
hands.
always a place for females, and I can only talk to about my experiences in the Middle East, and it's a definitely a needed position, and we're all about building rapport and building relationships. I think that's something that's that will always be needed. And then I think that take the male female. I think the what
Hmm.
veterans really truly you'll see a veteran who really truly understands that. Yeah, they may start, like you were talking about the first quarter. They may start low, but they'll always succeed and they'll always surpass the other individuals. And I'm not saying we're better, they're worse, yada yada yada. But what I'm saying is the fact that veterans need to wholeheartedly understand that, just because you took the uniform off, you don't lose
Hmm.
what you've learned and the experiences that you gained. And if the veterans that I've seen that have been successful are able to make that seamless transition to understand that just because it's a corporate world doesn't mean that the skill set that I've learned or that person has learned goes away. And that, like, the discipline, the understanding, to be able to drink from the fire hose, to be able to stay somewhat calm and make a decision under pressure. I think all of these are attributes that a
Hmm.
individual in the corporate world or wherever can be extremely successful if they're able to use that. It's the struggles the veterans face of not truly understanding that and giving them the power like you did is like you're awesome. Let's not talk about all the bad stuff. Let's talk about the good stuff that you did, um, and empower them. And I think that's one of the core fundamentals that we want to drive home here is that you empower veterans. Yeah, we've gone through a lot. We've
Hmm.
seen a lot of horrible things, uh, but that's okay because we can continue to improve and continue to heal.
Hmm.
But it takes work, and doing that is something that I just definitely want to echo and I love that. I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, go ahead.
Not to interrupt too, but when I was going through the research, like obviously if you do a great literature review, you're not just picking cherries, like you're trying to encompass everything that's out there so you can build upon it. And so then within that, like there's plenty of military research about other veterans other than GWAT veterans. And so I'm looking at those populations too, and then I'm thinking, yeah, they're not even being highlighted. Look what they went
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and they're doing good, and they don't
Well
even, half
said.
the time you don't even know they're a veteran. And here the GWAT veterans are like, because they have social media, they think like they're the first veterans
Yeah,
of
I think
life.
we are. I think
And
the
it's
the
just kind of
modalities,
like, hey,
the
like
outside the box thinking when it comes to
let's
mental
look
health
at the like
is
actual
there.
lifespan. Are we
And it's
improving? Are
unfortunate
we
that,
declining? Let's talk
you
about it.
know, pre 9/11 Vietnam veterans that may not have been able to receive that and gone darker into that hole.
Hmm.
And we're creatures of habit, and not being able to get yourself out. Um, but yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting perspective on GWAT guys, and obviously GWAT is over. So we are now, back to being building our military again to the next conflict. Yeah, well said. I like that.
We're gonna see a bunch of those, those Vietnam veteran hats. So it's gonna be GWAT hats going around. Give that like 5 years, and we're gonna get a bunch of those. But I think, yeah, like the dudes that aren't being covered. I thought back to the movie Jarhead. I mean, you don't really hear much about like Desert Storm dudes. These guys are still kicking around,
100%.
and they're still, but a lot of them didn't get into combat, and
100%.
they're
So my first post back position was in a neuroscience lab at Stanford. So I moved to California to pursue this research. The research project that I got hired for and wanted to pursue was doing a modality. It's a mechanical modality called TMS or RTMS, which stands for repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. The science behind it is there are two magnetic plates that I will program to pulse at a certain rate, and I'll put them in a certain location of a lobe of your brain that is correlated to PTSD or depression. And then we'll do that treatment over so much time, and we have all these baselines to see if it's helping or not. My population, however, was Desert Storm men. It could be women, there just wasn't enough of them. And really interacting my first time clinically in a research capacity with men from Desert Storm and watching how, never being recognized. A few of my patients, they actually invaded Iraq the first time. They would show me these pictures, and they're like, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so cool. Like, you should be so proud of yourself. And obviously, they're not doing well, or so they wouldn't be in the study. And they're just like, oh, well, nobody's really recognized it because of like GWA. And I was like, that's their wrong. Like that's their error. Like you fought for so many things. Just like why is your service any less just because it was less media driven or is less politically correct at the time? It doesn't really matter. It's not about that. It's about you and your tenacity to do this. And then they would tell me, and some of them were also Vietnam vets. They were older, like Desert Storm enlisted members or officers, and the stories that they had, I remember thinking like, I don't even know if a GWAT veteran could have handled what this person's telling me. Yet this man has been keeping it because um, the VA wouldn't recognize Desert Storm for a while, and they had a very significant illness that I was trying to see if TMS would help, called Gulf War illness, and it is a debilitating toxic exposure disease, way worse than Agent Orange, way worse than burn pits as far as we know it, because it's a different timeline, and it mimics fibromyalgia, and they're losing their bodies. They can't do anything. All they now
Yeah,
have their
gosh.
mind, and they've been
I think that
devalued for so long. And
that
now they're
procedure,
in
I've
their
heard of
50s
that.
and
I've not
60s
heard
trying to work it
how
out, but they've
powerful it
lost
is, but I've
everything
definitely heard
because
of
nobody helped them along the way.
individuals getting it done. Yeah, I think
There,
there's a lot out there, a lot to to approach,
Hmm.
and that was my approach. I recently in our one of our past guests
Yeah.
talked about the dual stellate ganglion blocks, and I recently got that done, and it was an interesting, uh, like very easy treatment. But I did a lot of research prior to that of which one should I do
Okay.
that or should I do? There's other
Okay.
a friend of mine did the ketamine treatment and that worked miraculously for him. Um, so I think that's where we're at now, or at least our
Hmm.
society is there's so much out there. It's almost like nonprofits. There's so many nonprofits
Hmm.
out there. You never knew any of them
Hmm.
when we were in. But now when you're out, you're like, oh wow, there's so many out there.
Yeah.
There's so much different, mental procedures to help to assist you in healing. At least get the ball rolling. It's
Hmm.
not going to be that magic pill. And I did think that for a second. I was like, oh, is this block going to be the magic pill? Is it going to be the easy button and boom, I'm fixed? And I'm glad I had a lot of mentors
Hmm.
talk to me about that because that's not the case. It takes work and effort.
But it wasn't just one moment that got you there. And I think a lot of people have to understand there. There wasn't one day that broke you, you know. It was several, you know, paper cuts, death by like several paper cuts, you know. And I think when people are thinking like about modalities, it might
Absolutely.
be a variable of trying the right one at the
Yeah,
right time with whatever you got
what
going
I like
on.
that. Like
And
that's
it might be a
a
combination, and
combination.
then you might have
Try
to revisit
something.
it in 5 years because
And I
life
know
isn't
that the
easy.
VAs they're not as far as I'd hope, but they are. And I think some VAs now have the whole self, a whole body clinic, right, where they'll at least entertain some of these newer procedures to help with PTS, anxiety and depression, and the stuff that
Yeah.
is magnified by those thousand paper cuts that we get.
Yeah, and I know there's definitely some things I want to get into, like I've been hearing more and more about on the alternative side. But what we're going to do real quick is we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with you, talk about some of our sponsors, all
Hmm.
that goodness who make all this possible. So we're back at it. Right before the break, we were kind of talking about, if you want to call them alternative treatments to PTS, addictive personalities, whatever, all that genre that kind of comes with PTS. And I've been listening to a few different podcasts. And, they talk about all the alternative medications, if you want to call them medications, or treatments going into ayahuasca treatments, or this one that I heard about. This veteran had to go down to Mexico because they don't cover it. It's great segment, but they say stuff like peyote, ayahuasca is like a hug from your grandmother. This is like a slap from your grandfather. I mean, it's a 12-hour purge, but it's a physical manifestation of your addictions or your PTS that you get out. Of course, it's not a one time solves all. You have to work at it, but there's
Hmm.
so many things that should be used, that could be used, but instead we're shoved um just basically pretty opioids. and pretty heroin down our throats. I mean, that's just a constant thing. I tried to get help for ADHD, and they're like, "Oh, hey, here's an antidepressant." It's like, thanks. That's not what I really need. I definitely don't want to be on my third antidepressant that you're trying to prescribe me, but I have some other issues. I think this is what it is. Here's my evidence. You're sad. I promise it's not just that. But
Yeah, I think a lot of, we will always, and that's not we, but individuals will always go for what they're comfortable doing. And the trifecta, I call it, is the antidepressant, the heart or antacid, and then the sleep medication. That's like the trifecta of the VA that gives you. And I was on that for a long time.
yeah,
But it's yeah, and again, I just can't give enough credit to these individuals creating these nonprofits that are going out there and saying there's other ways. Yeah, the data is infant right now. However, we've seen great results, so we're going to continue to do it. It's
yeah.
unfortunate that our system's not there. Is it going to be there next year? Probably not. Is it going to be there in 5 years? Maybe, hopefully. With enough data, with enough demand, I think they're going to have to at least entertain those ideas.
Maybe by the time the next war rolls around, we'll find out.
Can't argue with history. It's coming someday.
Yeah, eventually. But Kaitlin, I know kind of following your Instagram a little bit, you're getting a lot more into kind of physical training, and especially
Yeah.
CrossFit's kind of looks like it'd be your jam. But how's that? I mean, progressed. I mean,
Yeah.
I know especially to me going into CrossFit, doing into something fitness, especially I don't know if you want to call it group oriented, but it's the same as the military. I mean, you're embracing the suck.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the shit with somebody and you're suffering together. So I think that's what's helped me get back in that community. You're trying to find it again. What's kind of your take? Because I know you're pretty big into it, and we're trying to progress.
Yeah. So kind of like my fitness journey is I grew up as a athlete. I actually had a D1 athletic scholarship after high school and decided not to go and actually join the Air Force. Um, I really just felt this call to serve, and I was so really disheartened when I was meeting my new peers in the Air Force and nobody was there patriotically like I was. And so then, but when I was in high school, I had to lift in order to play. I had a conditioning coach who was our girls' volleyball conditioning coach, but also the boys' football um, conditioning coach. And he was like, I don't care. You're all in the weight room with me. So we had to go or we couldn't play. So I learned how to lift from an early age, just general Olympic lifting. And so I just kept doing it as I got older. And then it really helped when I had such a physical demanding job in the Air Force because you're not allowed to make somebody lift something for you. Like, and you wouldn't be socially accepted if you did. Um, then I just kept working at that. And then when I actually was pregnant with my son, he displaced my L5 on my spine. And the DOD could not figure that out. I just had really bad hip pain, and I kind of became not as mobile as I would like to be. And then their solution was just to put me on opioids. So I was prescribed Percocets for 3 years
I know,
straight,
especially
and I took
pretty
one
for
every
that pretty
day just
heroin
to get
too.
around.
Goodness gracious,
And
three
I
years of
praise God
that.
every
This
day that I'd not get
and
an
them just
addiction,
figure it
and
out.
that
Good
I
luck.
don't have
Goodness.
that type of addiction to opioids, essentially. Yeah, yeah. So I was actually able to have a physical therapist off-site of the VA finally realize that I had a spinal issue, and then he helped me through different modalities that he did to where I didn't have to take my medication anymore, and that was just such a big win. But in the interim, the only exercise I could do was yoga. And at the time, I thought yoga was like glorified stretching. I was just like, this is not fitness. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, but there was this really nice yoga studio when I was still in Phoenix that gave absolutely free tuition to veterans. And I was like, I can't say no to this, like it's technically making me feel better. Like I was totally mocking it and like naysaying it while showing up. And then I just started feeling a lot better. I was able to move. I didn't have to take my medication anymore. And then I kept going, but I was always so concerned about lifting again that I would displace that L5, and the VA wasn't really great at helping me with it. And then I kind of just was like, I'm not going to let this hold me back. I already got figured out the first time. If I get injured, I'll figure out the second time. Because I just like to lift heavy things. It makes me feel better. And so I started lifting again, just traditional, like gym lifting, just traditional movements. And when I moved to Nashville, I got into the CrossFit scene, and I just really loved the class stuff, like having a community. And with CrossFit too, like they want to hang out with you. And I just moved to a new city, so it was like the best way for me to meet people. And then I just kept going, and I started noticing like my movements that I had been doing up to that point for 15 years, how much they were improving. And I was also getting a lot more strength because of the programming. Like I was constantly just doing the same
Awesome. I mean, it
programming,
sounds like a
didn't know
good
much
story.
how
I
to
mean, and just
program
in general, I'm
myself.
glad you found that
And finally
community.
having
I
somebody
know
program
finding
me
your niche,
long
especially with
term
fitness, is
just by going to the gym,
just
I
not
saw
easy
like
as it is, and you
vast
had to
improvements to
experiment
a
a
lot
lot
of my
with that. But it
numbers.
seems like it's going good for you. How's the training? How's the training as of right now? How's it all going for
It's
you?
so bad. It's so bad right now, actually. I haven't been able, I've been going through like a big transition. I started two new jobs, I moved, just having some different life stress. Um, Kind of kept me out
Yep.
of the gym for various reasons. And then I'm trying to get back, but then I'm just like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm actually like not athletic. I can't do these things because I'm like out of shape. And then
Guys, I'm in honestly the exact same boat. I used to do CrossFit when I was before I got out of the before I got out of the army, before with the medical discharge. I was at a small little gym up in Kansas. I mean, it's and I was always at the 9 o'clock mom class. That was my class, so of course I was like, I was good at it. I mean, it's a small gym in Kansas. I'm gonna be okay. And then I come to Nashville. And I'm just like, oh well, people are actually a lot better at CrossFit than me here. Bust my shoulder. Oh, I rolled my ankle twice really bad, and then so I stopped, and now I haven't gone back for a year. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't like this gym, but I really want to go again. But it's like I don't want to suck. I mean, and my shoulder's busted right now, so I hate having to go up to a coach and be like, "Hey, I got to modify this." It's like nobody cares. They don't know who I am. They don't give a crap about how well I can do. It's like, oh, get in there.
Yeah,
Oh, exactly,
opens that
exactly.
door, opens that door for negative self-talk. But that was I never looked at it that way. I always understood that, lifting, and I've heard some research about lifting in the community. Obviously, reduces depression. Uh, but how is it when, right? Not if, that there's an injury or a life that sets you back. How does it affect you getting back into it? Because what you're capable of, but you're not there. So I like that. Like giving yourself grace is extremely important. I think you know we don't necessarily do that as often as we should. Um, but yeah, but once we get up to the top, well, it makes it that much better, right? Of the hard work, the determination, the sacrifice, all those the things that we've done in our service. Good stuff. Um, so the fitness journey, I like it. It's harder than always is anticipated because life happens, and that's what makes us who we are at the core. Um, so you came to Nashville, got into a community, which I think is essential for anyone, let alone veteran or not. And then you kind of dove into the neuro world and the and if I heard you correctly, you talked about the you know developmental of your brain, early on in your adolescent years and how that impacts you with PTS. Is
hmm
that correct? Can
yes,
you
I can.
explain that?
So there's several avenues that could be a factor. One that's very significant, that's replicated over and over. If you had any type of childhood trauma, especially for men, it's the it's called ACE, adverse childhood experiences. So it could be that you were around it, that you heard about it, or it happened to you. at any point, any kind of adverse, and it has a criteria. One probably I couldn't quote right now, but if you were to experience ACE in childhood, the likelihood that you would join the military is skyrocketed. The rate in which you would join special operations, that's even more so. Yeah. So,
Ben, we got to go about your trauma. We got to go into your
Yeah,
childhood, my
we
guy.
gotta
Let's
we gotta
go.
we gotta unpack that. We got another couple of more days for that one.
yeah. And then even the likelihood that somebody that joined and became a special operator and did have ACE, the likelihood that they'll find a lifelong partner that had childhood trauma, like, is guaranteed almost. um, so
Breaking that mold right now.
A lot of people are looking at themselves and looking at their significant
I
others like,
know,
oh, this
yeah,
explains so much right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Never listening to this podcast again.
Still
Honey, we
happening.
both have trauma. We got to go get counseling now.
Yeah. But I mean, like attracts like, so I don't think it's the
Yeah.
worst thing ever. And I think the worst thing when you have experienced trauma is trying to explain your trauma to others or make them feel comfortable with your shit, you know? And it's like,
Hmm.
well,
Yeah.
like I'm a victim in this. Like, why do I need to like make you feel comfortable as if like it happened to you? I'm the one that like is working through it. But uh when it comes to PTSD and developmental, it really kind of will shape different parts of yourself neurologically and create programming, as you could say. I don't really want to get into all the nomenclature because I don't think anybody would actually follow it or care that much. But like we'll just call it like you get neurological programming, and then you could say there's confounds to it that it's psychological, it's neuropsych, right? And then that also probably changes how you grow up in your body as well. So then that's what I really like is the neuropsych phys model and kind of understanding like, okay, my brain developed this way, so then I think about myself this way, then I see other people this way, and then I act accordingly with my body to like live within that. And so what I like about learning about PTSD from a developmental age is like, let's go back to like troubleshooting from the start. Where did it go wrong? Can we go back and like break that, and will everything else follow?
Not fun, but needed, right? Not
Not
Completely.
fun. Not fun at
no.
all.
But yeah, you got to understand, right? You got to understand where you came from, understand what you went through, to be able to live a healthier life and to
Well, and
make
understand it was
better
okay.
decisions. Yeah, absolutely.
So many, especially men that had any type of childhood ACE, they will not speak about it. And so many of my patients, when I was studying Gulf War, they were in their 50s and 60s, and that was the first time telling me that they were molested as a child. And then I was like, that's, I was validating them, like, this is horrible. And they're like, but I'm okay. I'm like, but you're here. So are you? Like, and it's okay that you're here because you're finally admitting it. You're winning at the end of this day. It stinks that you didn't win those other days and you win that battle the other days, but here we are. Like a win is a win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the amount of talking and the amount of, like you said, nonprofits that exist and just the amount of awareness we're bringing to it, give it back 10 years, let's go 20, 15 years ago. No guy would have came forward and actually been like, hey, I'm not okay. Or just, hey, I might want to go get this checked out because we were still, I mean, especially a lot of veterans, I think we were still very heavily engaged in a war. We did not have that time to
Right.
feel things. So I'm glad that things are calming down a little bit where guys actually feel comfortable enough to say, yeah, I haven't slept a solid night since 2003. So let's get this figured out.
But you
Yeah.
also have to think about like we're always like dealing with two generations of veterans at the same time in a service, just like in any workplace, two or three in the civilian world.
Going into
Or
two different generations.
yeah, yeah, and that generation of men were told by the generation of men that raised them up in the military, we don't talk about that. Don't talk about that. Like, why would you talk about that? Just move on. That was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's a stigma of the sign of weakness, right? Um,
Yeah.
And I do see that. That is absolutely 100% changing. And one things we can talk all day long about social media and the impacts of it, of you know mental impacts of it on people. But I do think that social media has helped our society being able to give another voice to these veterans, and the ability to now obtain information. I think that's massive, and knowing that there's other people out there that are struggling, uh, you know, enables that person to kind of feel at ease and come together and heal amongst a community. So I think that's a positive that is coming out, and it is unfortunate, but that, yeah, you win that day, right? You may not have won the past, but today you win,
Yeah.
and tomorrow you can win, and you can continue to win, and your life's not over. And I think that's a
Yeah.
um, pretty empowering, to hear that from somebody who's, for somebody who is struggling.
Yeah. And what I love to tell people, because they're so like, everyone's diagnosing everybody nowadays, and I think that's so bizarre because the DSM and these diagnoses were made for clinicians to talk to other clinicians in shorthand. So it wasn't like 3 pages to talk to one person's symptoms. It's like, hey, this is representative of this
Yeah.
thing, like
Yeah.
let's call it what it is so we can save time and help everybody better. But one thing that does drive me is everybody's becoming a psychologist, and so they're self-diagnosing everybody or themselves. And uh, uh, get frustrated because I was like, okay, so say you do have this disorder, say you do have this disease, then what? Is all of a sudden tomorrow you're better because you've been diagnosed?
Nope.
Like, what does it actually matter what your diagnosis or disorder is? Let's just talk about what's holding you back. And if it falls into a very special category that there is a great treatment just for that, what does it matter what all those names are? Why don't we just focus on you? You're not your disorder, you're not your disease. And I think people get so scared of the labels.
Yes.
Yeah.
But some of the greatest minds that have created the things that make our day every day, the geniuses of our history of our species, they all had mental health disorders. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know why we're afraid of it. Why can't we also see it as a positive thing? Like, oh, I actually put myself out there and I got hurt and now I have some symptoms, but it's not going to hold me back.
Yeah.
We're getting there. We're figuring it out as we go. I mean,
Yeah. I think that it's better to know, right? Now that once you understand, you can now devise a plan and put in that effort to work on yourself. And I think that was for me, is once I actually was like, okay, and the acceptance piece, right? Is the acceptance is like, okay, this is it. This is who I am. This is what I've, what happened, and this is who who I'm, you know, who I am now. But what that doesn't define who I will be, right? So I have to put in the work every single day. But I love the trajectory of mental health space, where we're going now, and veteran, non-veteran. I think that there's trauma is trauma, and trauma is important to each and every person because they experienced it. And I think hopefully that maybe we could be the test bunnies for some of these modalities, and it's like, oh well, these work.
Yeah.
Let's now offer it to other people who may not be veterans, but also have experienced traumatic events in their life.
Yeah.
Guess we're all figured out. I'm glad to be a test bunny. Just
I like that, test bunnies.
Yeah, that it's just like, you know what? Like, hey, we're gonna do a treatment of ayahuasca. Send it. Let's go for it. Then only thing he tried doesn't hurt, right? Maybe just a little. Maybe just a little bit.
Well, my next job after working at that lab at Stanford, I then worked for a Silicon Valley mental health psychiatry startup. And so then that was the first time I was working with a civilian population. And then the more I was working with that population, I remember thinking oh, these people haven't been challenged before they are actually having to deal with this depression. And so they do not know how to pick themselves up or that it could be done. And then when I would talk to military members going through the same thing, they're just like, I just can't get there. I know I can't, I know I'm possible. I just don't know how. And I'm frustrated because I can't figure out how. And the civilians were like,
yep.
you know?
Hmm.
Like, and I remember thinking like, no, like be motivated. Like, do not let this overcome you. Like everyone's supporting you here. Like we're getting you this medication. It's top of the line. Like you signed up for it. That's so awesome that you even signed up for this trial. And like, it was just really hard to get them to be motivated. And it made me more proud to be a veteran, like seeing that
Yeah.
population.
It's just their mind and their mission. They got to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, as we start to wrap up here, the one thing I love to do is recall your favorite memory while you were in. I mean, that could be good memory, bad memory, your best oh shit moment, whatever it may be. But especially being a fighter line like you, because I listened to your podcast, so you like there is no difference in between you being in Qatar or you being stateside. That's
Yeah.
you. That's just your job. So, what's your
Yeah.
what's your best memory?
I don't know why this one's coming to mind, but I think like everybody can share this experience. Um, I was a little E2 or E3, and I was being hazed like my first move. Like I just could not show up at any day not being hazed. But nobody explained to me verbally that I was being hazed. So I was like, they hate me. I'm horrible at my job. The life sucks. And then they would do things, and I would take it to heart because I'm such a perfectionist. I'm like, what did I do wrong for this to be like this? And so, one day, and a lot of times when you work on the flight line, like you may not even wear your uniform ever. You might wear your coveralls or just like jeans because everything's getting dirty all the time. Or you'll never wear your top really or your hat. So sometimes you kind of lose track of them if you're just getting out of your car and going to work. And I guess I left my top there the night prior because I'd always work swing shift and then day shift. I don't know, they were just pranksters. And so they found my top. And at the time, our shop was under construction. So our shop was in temporarily in a has. And what a has is like a half dome concrete thing that you would think of like a shelter that's permanent. And so those are built to store aircraft in case like those are assets that need to be protected in case of weather or bombing or whatever. So they put us in there, and it was disgusting. I hated it, but uh, they're really really high. I think the ceiling would probably be like 50 feet high, and so I don't know how this dude did this, but his name was Boyle, and he would just rag on me any chance he got. And then he kind of was like the king E4 at the time. And it kind of just felt like he ran the show. It was like, well, Boyle said. And it'd be like a master sergeant was like, I don't give a fuck what Boyle said. And so I come into the shop, and all I see is just my top on a hanger at the top of the has, right in the middle, like centerfold. And then I was so defeated at the time from the hazing that I was just like, and just kept walking. Like I was like, I didn't do that,
Fuck yeah.
and just kept walking. And I'm never wearing that thing ever. So, and then I go into roll call, and I had an old, gritty, musty master sergeant at the time, Sergeant Tucker, and he goes, and he had like one of those caterpillar mustaches, like
Oh
barely any
yeah.
legs, and yeah, and he was like, "What's going up? What's going on with your top?" And I was like, "I literally didn't know. Do you think I did that? Like, I'm working, I'm busy." And then he was like, "But it's your top." And I was like, but I didn't do it. Like, what do you want me to do about it? He's like, you need to get it down. And I was like, why don't you ask who put it up? Like, why don't we ask those questions first? And so he was like, doesn't matter. It's your top. And then all I see is Boyle just snickering. And then I was just like, what did I do to Boyle? Like, I don't understand. And then we were getting an assignment to deploy, and I'm just like, it was just that mode every day where I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to go and work and spend an hour extra work, probably go early to like get out of the hazing so I could do my actual work. And so I get to work, and he tells me, he's like, did you hear you got late added to the deployment? And I was like, for real? And he was like, yeah. And it's like my first year in the deployment. And all I know about deploying is like the training I've got to like get ready so you're not like a problem. And so then I'm like making an appointment at legal to get my will done. Like I'm like setting up all my accounts to make sure they're on auto pay. I'm going to like Seaburn to get all my gear. And so I'm just doing this all on my own time. And then Boyle is tracking it. And he's like, good job, good job. Like, they're going to be so impressed with you. And I was like, oh, thank you. Because I'm so like just wanting to win Boyle over at this point. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I was like, and then I'm about to like buy tickets to like go home and leave to like see my family. And this is in like 2010. So like Afghanistan's like popping off enough. So I was like, oh my God. And I'm 20, 21. And so, and nobody's really telling me what deployment's like. And then so finally, I'm so stressed out to where other people are noticing it. And I was like, don't worry, guys. You don't have to worry about me. Like, I'm not going to be the problem here. I'm not the weak link. And my master sergeant, the same dude, called me up to his office and he's like, so I heard you are deploying. I was like, yeah, you don't have to worry about me though, Master Sergeant. Like, I'm doing everything. I got everything. The checklist is good. And then he was like, do you think that you or Boyle would know about you deploying before I know? And I remember sitting there and he just like pushed himself back on his desk. And I was thinking, I was like, I don't know, but Boyle knows everything. Like, that's all I could say. And then he's like, he's just looking at me and he's just so, he's like, I've let this go too far. And he's like, no, no, no. Who do you think deploys people? And I was like, well, Boyle told me. Like, I don't know. And then he was like, you've been played for about 3 weeks now. And it's been funny, but now it's getting crazy because now you're requesting leave, like you're bugging like lawyers. And I was like, and I didn't believe him. I was like, no, 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 you don't have to worry about me. Like, you don't have to take me off like the roster. I'll be fine. And then he's like, you are not deploying. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he was like, go downstairs and tell Boyle to come up. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking like, oh my God, I probably did something wrong. And then I go up and Boyle is like smile ear to ear the entire time. And then he comes back down with paperwork, like he got disciplinary action. And then he shows it to me, he's like, worth it. And I
Okay,
was like,
at least you're the good sport about that.
yeah. And he's like, that was worth everything. I don't give a fuck. I'm good for staff sergeant. I don't care. And I was like, wow. But then when I got in a position, I was like, I'm ready. Like, I got hazed by the best. No, like everybody's gonna feel my wrath. And so then later, 2 weeks later, I actually did get added to the deployment roster. I was like, like I'm not falling for it again. And they're like, you're deploying. I was like, okay. Like I just like for a week, they kept telling me, I was like, okay, guys, like I won't fall for it again. I get it. And they're like, no, legit. Like here are your orders. And I remember looking at them, I was like, these do look really legit.
Just traumatized, like never knowing for the rest of your career is like, I don't know.
I was like, I'm not trusting anybody ever again when it comes to Steve until I get the paperwork.
Good. That's a good story.
That's a lot better than mine. Just telling dudes to grab exhaust samples. That's all. That's all I had. That was fun enough.
Yeah. Yeah. No, Boyle took it to a whole nother level.
Legend. We got to get him on the pod. Just hear his
He, yeah,
rants.
he's like an old country boy, so he would have some good stories just in life.
Well, as we close out, Ben, sir, do you have any caveats, anything to add on, any questions or anything along those lines?
No, I thank you, Kaitlin, for all that you're doing, and the helping the veteran community, and learning as much as you can and helping to drive some of the PTS initiatives. I think that's pretty awesome in the veteran community. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, truly. Thank you so much for everything. Where can what do you guys what kind of got going on next? Like what's next up for you? Kind of to let everybody know where we can find you, all that goodness. What do you got coming?
Yeah. I primarily interact with humans on Instagram. And my handle is Kaitlin, Caitlin.CTHRN, Catherine without the vowels. It was actually my first AOL username that generated, and I've stuck with it ever since. And then obviously on LinkedIn, my name, Kaitlin Chacon, Chacon. And then that's kind of the easiest and best ways. I check those the most often.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Sweet. Well, thank you guys again so much for listening. We are truly grateful for y'all, and we are looking forward to seeing you next week on the next episode.